Your money doesn't exist, not physically. 97% of the world's money is digital numbers in bank computers, created out of thin air, lent out with real interest by banks that never owned this money. You work 8 hours to earn $50 that exist only as data. While central banks create trillions by typing numbers on screens, without working, without producing, without real backing. This is the first truth the system hides. Modern money is the biggest fiction ever created, and fictions control realities. Machiavelli wrote, "As men judge more by the eye than by the hand, everyone can see, but few can touch the truth." You see money. They know it's a controlled illusion. You believe in the value. They control the belief. There are truths about money that would break civilizations if they were understood by the masses. Truths that explain why some become trillionaires without producing anything. Why inflation exists. Why entire countries fall into debt. Why you work more and have less. The current monetary system was designed 400 years ago by European banking families, perfected through wars, crises, and revolutions, tested on empires, applied globally for a single function, to transfer real wealth to those who control imaginary money. Rothschild said, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who writes its laws." Because those who control money control everything: governments, companies, people, civilizations. Today, you will discover how the biggest lie in humanity became the greatest tool of control ever invented, and why Machiavelli predicted all of this 500 years ago. Nixon broke the last link between money and reality in 1971. He abandoned the gold standard. He transformed the dollar into an empty promise, and the whole world accepted the lie. Before 1971, every dollar represented a fixed amount of gold in U.S. vaults. The dollar had real value, physical backing, natural limit. After 1971, the dollar became a promise from the American government. Colored paper, digital numbers, manufactured confidence. The prince who relies entirely upon fortune is ruined when it changes. Machiavelli knew that power based on illusions is temporary, but he also knew that well-constructed illusions can last generations. The lie is simple. You believe the dollar has value because someone accepts it in exchange for products. But why do they accept it? Because others accept it. It is a circle of collective belief, mass hypnosis. When belief breaks, the dollar turns into worthless paper. Weimar, 1923. Bread cost 1 billion marks. People carried money in wheelbarrows to buy milk. Zimbabwe, 2008. Inflation of 231 million% per year. Venezuela today, 1 million bolivars buys a coffee. Turkey, 2023. The Turkish lira lost 80% of its value in 2 years. When governments print money without limit, value collapses. But collapse never reaches those who control printing. Only those who receive the money later, you. The brutal truth: money has had no intrinsic value since 1971. It only has agreed value. And agreements can be broken at any time by those who have the power to break them. The Federal Reserve prints $6 trillion to save banks in 2020. Your purchasing power decreases via inflation. They save friends with invented money. You pay the bill with real labor. BlackRock buys $15 billion in houses with new money from the Fed. Real estate prices explode. You can no longer buy a house. The system works like this. They create new money, buy real assets. Inflation erodes your old money. Wealth transfer disguised as monetary policy. A house that cost $25,000 in 1970 costs $400,000 today. Not because houses improved 16 times, because the dollar was devalued 16 times via money printing. Real estate inflation makes an entire generation unable to buy a home. Machiavelli observed, "Men are so simple and so much obey the necessities of the moment that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." The greatest modern necessity is to believe that money has value, so you accept being deceived every day. First hidden truth. The value of money is a collective hallucination controlled by the few to steal from the many. The bank lends $300,000 for you to buy a house. But the bank does not possess those $300,000. It creates them out of thin air by typing numbers into the computer. You sign a real contract to pay imaginary money with real labor for 30 years. This is modern alchemy, transforming digital numbers into human slavery. A prince never lacks legitimate reasons to break his promise. Machiavelli understood that those who make the rules can break the rules. Banks created rules where they don't need to have the money they lend, but you need to work decades to return it. Fractional reserve means that a bank only needs to have 10% of what it lends. It lends 1 million, having only 100,000. The other 900,000 are created electronically at the time of the loan. Digital magic that enslaves generations. You deposit $10,000 in the bank. The bank lends 9,000 to another person, keeping a 10% reserve. This person deposits 9,000 in another bank. This bank lends 8,100 to a third party, and so on. Your original $10,000 turned into nearly 100,000 in loans in the system. But who receives interest from the 100,000? Banks. Who works to pay the 100,000? Debtors. You created money for banks to profit without the banks possessing the original money. Perfect system. Banks profit by lending money they don't have to people who will work decades to return money that never physically existed. Financial slavery disguised as opportunity. J.P. Morgan Chase has $3.7 trillion in assets, but only $300 billion in real capital. Leverage of 12.1. If 8% of the loans are not paid, the bank breaks. But when banks break, the government uses your tax money to save them. Profits are private. Losses are socialized. 2008, American banks broke due to irresponsible lending. The government printed $4 trillion to save them. The ensuing inflation eroded the purchasing power of those who work. Banks got bigger after the crisis they themselves created. A student graduates owing $200,000 in student loans, works 20 years paying it. In the end paid $400,000, compound interest. The university received $200,000 that the government created out of thin air. The bank profited $200,000 in difference. The student worked 2 decades to enrich the system that indebted him. The system did not fail. It worked exactly as designed, to transfer wealth from producers to money controllers. Machiavelli warned, "He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner effects his ruin than his preservation." You should understand how money works. You neglect this education. Result, perpetual financial slavery. Second hidden truth. Banks have turned debt into a prison, and you into a voluntary prisoner who pays for their own cell. Inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It is an invisible tax that steals your purchasing power, transferring it to those who receive the new money first. The greatest robbery machine ever invented, operating 24 hours a day, legally. The Federal Reserve prints $4 trillion new dollars in 2020. This money first goes to banks, the government, and large corporations. They buy assets, stocks, real estate, commodities, with new money before prices rise. When the new money reaches the real economy, inflation has already eroded the value of your salary. It is better to be feared than loved. Machiavelli knew that invisible power is more effective than visible violence. Inflation is invisible power. It steals without the victim perceiving the thief. 1913, the Federal Reserve is created. The power to print the dollar moves from the government to a private banking cartel. Since then, the dollar has lost 96% of its purchasing power. In 1913, $1 bought what $30 buy today. A 96% theft in 110 years. Cantillon effect: those who receive the new money first benefit. Those who receive it last are harmed. Wall Street receives new trillions via QE, quantitative easing. Buys everything cheap. When inflation hits your salary, prices have already exploded. Tesla was worth $50 billion in 2019, worth $800 billion in 2021. The company did not improve 16 times. The Federal Reserve printed trillions that inflated asset bubbles. Musk got richer not by producing more cars, but by receiving new money first. Your savings in a savings account yield 0.5% per year. Real inflation is 8% per year. You lose 7.5% of purchasing power annually. The bank takes your money, lends it at 18% to others, and keeps the difference. You pay to be robbed. A house that cost $50,000 in 1970 costs $500,000 today. Not because houses improved 10 times, because the dollar was devalued 10 times via money printing. The average family spent 2 annual salaries to buy a house in 1970. Today they spend 8 annual salaries. Education that cost $2,000 per year in 1980 costs $50,000 today. Not because teachers got 25 times better. Because the government offers unlimited student loans. Universities increase prices, absorbing new money. Students leave indebted for decades. Healthcare that cost $500 per treatment costs $50,000 today. Not because doctors became 100 times more efficient. Because insurance funds treatments with inflationary money. Hospitals inflate prices. People become indebted or die. The pattern repeats. The government injects new money into a sector. Prices explode in that sector. Whoever needs those services becomes indebted. Healthcare, education, real estate, all artificially inflated. Machiavelli observed, injuries ought to be done all at one time, benefits little by little. The system robs you little by little via inflation. It benefits the elite all at once via money printing. Third, hidden truth. Inflation is a tax you pay, without knowing, to finance the wealth of those who are already rich while impoverishing those who work. 6 banks control 95% of global financial transactions. J.P. Morgan, $4 trillion. Bank of America, $3 trillion. Wells Fargo, $2 trillion. Citigroup, $2 trillion. Goldman Sachs, $1 trillion. Morgan Stanley, $1 trillion. They don't compete, they collaborate. It is not a free market, it is a legalized cartel. Divide and conquer. Machiavelli knew that the few united control the many divided. Banks have been united for decades. The population remains divided, discussing politics, while the banking cartel loots the world economy. The Federal Reserve is neither federal, nor does it possess reserves. It is a private corporation controlled by member banks. It has the power to print the American currency, define global interest rates, and decide which banks break or survive. Zero transparency, zero democratic accountability. Jackson Hole. Meeting. Central bankers from around the world meet annually at a $10,000 a day resort to coordinate monetary policies. There is no live transmission. There are no public minutes. They decide the destiny of 100 trillion in absolute secrecy, more powerful than any government. 2008. Lehman Brothers breaks, losing $600 billion. Goldman Sachs survives, receiving $10 billion in a bailout. Why? Henry Paulson, U.S. Treasury Secretary, was the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. He saved his former company with public money. He let a competitor fail. Revolving door between Wall Street and government. BlackRock manages $10 trillion, more than the GDP of the United States, $25 trillion, and China, $18 trillion, combined. It owns shares in virtually all major global corporations. When BlackRock votes in assemblies, it decides the direction of the global economy. One fund controlling everything. Vanguard owns $8 trillion. State Street owns $4 trillion. 3 asset managers control $22 trillion. More than the GDP of the United States and China combined. Competition is an illusion when the same owners control all competing companies. Coca-Cola is worth $280 billion. Pepsi is worth $180 billion. BlackRock and Vanguard are the biggest shareholders in both. McDonald's is worth $200 billion. Burger King is worth $30 billion. The same funds own both. Boeing is worth $150 billion. Airbus is worth $120 billion. The same elite owns both. The cartel doesn't need to hold secret meetings to fix prices. It's enough to coordinate via cross-ownership. When the same owners control supposed competitors, competition becomes a theater for the masses. 2020. The Federal Reserve prints $6 trillion. The European Central Bank prints 2 trillion euros. The Bank of Japan prints 1 trillion yens. The Bank of England prints 500 billion pounds. Simultaneous global coordination. There is no independence. There's a global cartel operating above national sovereignties. Machiavelli taught, "It is necessary to be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." The banking cartel is a fox when it uses financial complexity to confuse the masses. It is a lion when it breaks entire countries via monetary speculation. Fourth, hidden truth. Competition in the financial system is an illusion. A global cartel controls world money and decides who gets rich or poor. Argentina broke 9 times, Brazil broke 3 times, Greece broke 2 times, Turkey broke 1 time. Sri Lanka broke in 2022, not due to incompetence, by design. Countries don't break. They are broken by international financial speculation. A prince must have 2 concerns, external war and internal conspiracy. Machiavelli did not imagine there would be financial war where countries would be broken without a shot being fired. The recipe for breaking a country is simple. Offer cheap dollar loans when the dollar is weak. The country gets indebted, contracting $100 billion at 2% interest, then the dollar strengthens, and interest rates are raised to 8%. The country cannot pay the debt in a strong dollar. It breaks. The IMF saves it with conditions that surrender sovereignty. Turkey 2018. Erdogan printed trillions of liras. Inflation exploded to 85% per year. The lira plummeted 80% against the dollar. Turks with $100,000 loans saw debts explode to 500,000 liras overnight. Lira savings turned to dust. Wall Street bought Turkish assets for pennies. Mexico, 1994. NAFTA promises prosperity. Foreign capital of $30 billion invades the country. Then the Federal Reserve raises American interest rates from 3% to 6%. Capital rushes out, taking $25 billion. The Mexican peso collapses 50%. The tequila crisis breaks the Mexican middle class. Mexican assets sold to Americans. The operation is always the same. Flood the country with cheap foreign capital. The country becomes addicted to external money. Quickly cut the tap. The country breaks. Buy national assets for pennies on the dollar. Greece 2010. Goldman Sachs helped the Greek government hide $15 billion in debt using complex derivatives. When the scheme was discovered, markets lost confidence. Greek interest rates exploded from 5% to 25%. The country broke, owing $350 billion. Germany and France saved Greece by lending $240 billion for Greece to pay German and French banks. Socialization of private losses disguised as humanitarian aid. Banks profit by lending irresponsibly. When the debtor breaks, the people pay via taxes, so the banks don't lose money. Sri Lanka, 2022. The country broke after the pandemic, owing $51 billion. It cannot import fuel, food, or medicine. The president fled the country, taking $13 million in cash. But who gets paid even with a broken country? International bondholders receiving $3 billion annually. The people starve so banks can receive interest. The final weapon, rating agencies, Moody's, S&P. Fitch decide if a country is reliable for loans. When they downgrade the rating, the cost of borrowing explodes. A country can break just because 3 American companies decided so. Greece had its rating lowered from A to CCC in 6 months. Debt cost exploded from 5% to 25% per year. The same agencies that gave LLA rating to toxic garbage in 2008 have the power to break sovereign countries. Obvious conflict of interest. They are paid by those who issue the bonds. They evaluate. Machiavelli warned, one should never allow a disorder to develop in order to avoid a war. The financial system intentionally creates disorders, crises, to conquer countries via economic war. Fifth hidden truth, financial crises are not accidents. They are weapons of territorial conquest without armies to steal national resources. Physical money is being eliminated. CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, will replace paper dollars. Absolute control over every penny you earn, spend, or possess. Financial dystopia disguising itself as technological progress. Whoever desires peace, let him prepare for war. Machiavelli knew that true powers prepare in silence. While you discuss politics, the financial system prepares total control via programmable money. China has already implemented the digital yuan, controlling 260 million users. The Chinese government can block any citizen's money instantly. It can define where they spend 500 yuan, when they spend it in the next 48 hours, with whom they spend it according to party approval. It can make money expire if it's not used according to social guidelines. The Chinese social credit works like this. Inappropriate behaviors decrease the score. A low score prevents the purchase of $200 airline tickets, enrollment in 10,000 annual universities, or access to 2,000 monthly jobs. Behavioral control via financial control. The Federal Reserve has been studying the digital dollar since 2020 with a $500 million budget. The European Central Bank is testing the digital euro with $350 million investment. The Bank of England is developing the digital pound with $200 million. Global coordination of $1 billion to eliminate physical money and implement programmable currencies. Advantages for them. Automatic taxation deducts 30% tax before the money reaches your account. Combating the informal economy, every penny tracked. Behavioral control can block spending on alcohol, cigarettes, betting. Elimination of bank runs can limit withdrawals to $100 daily. For you, zero privacy, zero financial autonomy, zero escape from the system, total control over your economic life. COVID was a global social control test costing $16 trillion worldwide. Lockdowns, health passports, requiring $50 test expenditures, digital tracking via mandatory apps, surprising acceptance of temporary authoritarian measures that became permanent in many places. Digital money will be sold as security. Combats $2 trillion annual money laundering? reduces 500 billion tax evasion, prevents 100 billion terrorist financing. Reality. It eliminates the last area of individual freedom, the ability to make private $10 transactions without state approval. The Credit Suisse Bank, run in 2023, happened via digital transfers. The bank lost $60 billion in 2 days via clicks on the cell phone. With CBDCs, the government can prevent bank runs by simply limiting withdrawals to $50 daily, digitally. Canada, 2022, the government froze the bank accounts of 200 Freedom Convoy protesters without a court order. Blocked $8 million in donations. No trial, no legal process, just a decree. People woke up unable to access their own money, a preview of a world with totally digital money. Machiavelli observed, changes in fortune bring changes in the character of men. When the system controls all money digitally, human character changes to complete submission or total revolt. Sixth hidden truth. Digital money is not technological evolution. It is a disguised authoritarian revolution to control every aspect of your life. Fortune is a woman, and to keep her submissive, it is necessary to beat her and contradict her. Machiavelli knew that voluntary submission generates inevitable tyranny. The time has come to contradict the system that has been contradicting you for decades. You have discovered that modern money is a controlled fiction that lost 96% of its value in 110 years. That banks lend money they don't possess, creating trillions out of thin air. That inflation is legalized theft, annually transferring 8% of your purchasing power to the elite. That a $22 trillion financial cartel controls the global economy. That countries are purposefully broken, losing trillions in assets. That digital slavery is coming via CBDCs. Now you have 2 choices that will define your financial existence. Choice 1. Continue in the illusion. Go back to your life as an employee earning $3,000 a month. Keep believing that the financial system exists to serve you. Keep saving in an account that yields 0.5% while inflation steals 8%. Keep working 40 years to pay for a $400,000 house that the bank created digitally. Keep being a product in someone else's system. It is more comfortable, it is less risky, it is more socially accepted, and it guarantees you will lose 50% of your purchasing power in the next 10 years. Choice 2. Exit the matrix. Accept that the system was designed to exploit you 8% per year, not to enrich you. Understand that whoever does not understand money is controlled by whoever understands it and loses 96% of their wealth over a lifetime. Realize that financial freedom requires rejecting inflationary currency and embracing real assets. If you choose this option, apply the Machiavellian countermeasures. Countermeasure. Replace 80% of fiat money with real stores of value. Physical gold maintains value for 5,000 years. Bitcoin, limited to 21 million. Productive real estate generates monthly income. Shares in companies that dominate markets. Assets that cannot be printed infinitely. Countermeasure 2. Minimize exposure to the banking system, keeping only $2,000 for monthly expenses in a checking account. Use banks as a payment tool, not as a savings vault. Every dollar sitting loses 8% of its annual value via inflation. Countermeasure. Invest 20% of income in skills that generate value independent of currencies. Programming, worth $100,000 annually. Sales, worth $150,000 annually. Digital marketing, worth $80,000 annually. Languages, increases salary by 30%. Contact networks, generate 500,000 opportunities. Human capital does not suffer inflation. Countermeasure. Diversify geographically, not placing more than 50% of assets in the same country, subject to the same monetary policies. The United States prints 6 trillion, Europe prints 2 trillion. Governments break, losing 100% of the value. Currencies collapse, losing 90% in 2 years. Diversification protects against confiscation via inflation. Countermeasure 5. Continuous financial education, investing $500 annually in books, courses, mentors who teach how the system really works. Knowledge is the only advantage that the elite cannot confiscate via inflation or CBDCs. People who understand money become 10 times richer than people who ignore it. Machiavelli taught, "It is better to act and regret than not to act and regret." The financial system is rapidly changing to CBDCs. Whoever does not act now to protect their wealth will suffer total control later. The transformation begins today. Stop storing paper that loses 8% of its annual value and start accumulating assets that gain 12% annually. Stop working just for an annual salary of $50,000 and start working for assets that passively generate $50,000. Stop trusting the system that robs you 8% per year and start protecting yourself from it. The truth sets you free, but only those who have the courage to face it and act based on it. The system hides truths about money because truths destroy controls. Now you know truths that are worth millions. The final question is, will you use them to free yourself or continue to be used by them to enrich others? Exiting the financial matrix is not a revolution. It is an evolution, from prey to predator, from controlled to free, from programmed poor to strategic rich. The choice is yours. The consequences are too.